It was just another uneventful Friday evening. I had spent the better part of the day working from home, a monotonous rhythm of Zoom calls, spreadsheets, and an endless stream of emails. By the time I logged off, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I stretched, cracked my knuckles, and decided to treat myself to some relaxation. The house was quiet, too quiet perhaps. My neighborhood was one of those serene suburban enclaves where nothing much happened. It was a cul-de-sac, surrounded by tall hedges and lined with houses that looked almost identical. Most of my neighbors were older couples or families with young children. It was the kind of place where you didn't think twice about leaving your door unlocked during the day. But tonight, as the silence seemed to stretch and thicken, an uneasy sensation began to creep up my spine. I shook it off, blaming it on the true crime podcast I'd been binge listening to earlier. That, and maybe the fact that the wind was particularly aggressive tonight, howling as if it were alive and determined to unsettle me. I pulled a frozen pizza out of the freezer, preheated the oven, and turned on the TV to drown out the eeriness. About 15 minutes into a mindless sitcom, I heard it. A faint rustling noise, like something or someone was brushing against the side of the house. At first, I thought it might be the wind, or maybe a stray animal. But then it came again, sharper this time, almost deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. Probably nothing, I muttered to myself, trying to dismiss the rising panic. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind urged me to check it out. I grabbed my phone, activating the flashlight, and walked toward the front door. I peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was just paranoia, but I locked the door and double-checked the windows. The rustling had stopped, but the uneasiness lingered. As I returned to the living room, my phone buzzed. A message from my neighbor, Mrs. Gibson, popped up on the screen. "Hey, did you see anyone walking around outside? I thought I saw a man near your yard just now. Be careful. ****. A chill ran through me. Mrs. Gibson wasn't one for practical jokes. If she said she saw something, she probably did. My fingers trembled as I typed back. "No, I didn't see anyone. Are you sure? ****. Her response came almost instantly. "Pretty sure. Keep your doors locked." "Okay." ****. I swallowed hard, my eyes darting to the windows. The curtains were drawn, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching me from the other side. I decided to leave the lights on in every room, a feeble attempt to ward off the growing sense of dread. The pizza timer beeped, making me jump. I laughed nervously at my own skittishness and retrieved the pizza from the oven. I brought the plate to the couch, but my appetite had all but vanished. Every bite felt like chewing cardboard as my mind raced with what-ifs. That's when I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a rustling. It was a soft, almost imperceptible tapping sound coming from the back door. My blood turned cold. I muted the TV and sat frozen, straining to listen. The tapping continued, irregular and faint, but definitely there. Summoning every ounce of courage, I tiptoed toward the kitchen where the back door was located. My hand hovered over the light switch. Did I really want to turn it on? Would it give away my position? My heart pounded in my chest, so loud I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. Finally, I flicked on the light. Nothing. The backyard was empty, or at least it appeared to be. I stared out through the glass, scanning for any sign of movement. The wind swayed the trees, their shadows dancing eerily against the fence. Just as I was about to turn away, a figure darted past the edge of the yard. My breath caught in my throat. It was too fast to make out any details, but it was definitely a person. My hands trembled as I locked the back door and drew the blinds. Panic was setting in now. I called the police. The dispatcher's voice was calm and steady, a stark contrast to my frantic tone. "We'll send someone out to check the area," she said. "Stay inside, keep your doors locked, and don't engage with anyone outside." The next 20 minutes felt like an eternity. I paced the living room, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside, sent my nerves into overdrive. Finally, Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the street. 2 officers knocked on my door, their presence a temporary balm for my frayed nerves. They took my statement and searched the yard but found nothing. "Could have been a prank or someone passing through," one of them said. "But keep your doors locked and call us if you see anything else." I nodded, though their words didn't do much to reassure me. As they left, I tried to convince myself that it was over, that I was safe. But deep down, I knew better. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right. I decided to sleep in the living room that night, keeping the lights on and a heavy flashlight within arm's reach. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that shadowy figure, lurking just out of sight. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by a loud crash. My eyes snapped open. The living room window was shattered, shards of glass glittering on the floor. Before I could react, a man stepped through the opening, his face obscured by a hood and scarf. My blood ran cold. He was in my house. Instinct took over. I grabbed the flashlight and swung it as hard as I could. It connected with his shoulder, eliciting a grunt of pain. He stumbled but didn't go down. I bolted for the kitchen, my heart pounding like a drum. I needed a weapon, something to defend myself. He was fast. Before I could reach the knife block, he tackled me to the ground. We struggled, his hands clawing at my arms as I fought to push him off. Adrenaline surged through me, giving me a burst of strength. I managed to knee him in the stomach and crawl away. Grabbing a knife, I turned to face him. He hesitated, his dark eyes narrowing as he sized me up. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Just leave." For a moment, it seemed like he might listen. But then he lunged at me. I slashed wildly, the blade catching his arm. He yelped and stumbled back, clutching the wound. Seizing the opportunity, I ran for the front door, throwing it open and screaming for help. Neighbors' lights flicked on one by one. The man, realizing he was outnumbered, turned and fled into the night. The police arrived minutes later, their search dogs in tow. This time, they found him hiding in a nearby yard, his blood trail leading them straight to him. As they cuffed him and led him away, I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering fear. He was caught, but the memory of those terrifying hours would stay with me forever. My once quiet home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It would take time to feel safe again, but at least for now, the nightmare was over. It was an ordinary Friday evening, and the neighborhood was bathed in the golden hues of a setting sun. I'd spent the day catching up on mundane tasks, laundry, grocery shopping, and tidying up my small but cozy home. As dusk settled in, the comforting hum of suburban life slowed to a whisper. The faint sound of children's laughter drifted through the open window, soon replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The house felt too quiet. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. The week had been uneventful, and I relished the calm. Outside, the wind began to pick up, brushing against the shutters like a hesitant visitor. It was the kind of evening where the mind wandered easily, where every sound seemed amplified by the stillness. Around 8 p.m., as I debated whether to start a movie or dive into a book, I heard it. A faint, deliberate knock at the front door. It wasn't the casual rap of a neighbor dropping by, but something slower, calculated. My heart skipped a beat. Visitors were rare at this hour. I stood up, my bare feet brushing against the cold hardwood floor, and peered through the peephole. The porch light cast an eerie glow, but the space beyond the door was empty. A chill ran down my spine. I hesitated, listening intently for any sound outside. After a long moment of silence, I convinced myself it must have been the wind. Still, I double-checked the locks before retreating to the kitchen. As I busied myself making tea, the faint sensation of being watched settled over me. I glanced toward the window, the curtains drawn tight, and shook off the feeling. Maybe it was the unsettling news stories I'd been reading lately. accounts of break-ins and suspicious strangers roaming nearby neighborhoods. I reminded myself that I lived in a safe area. Nothing ever happened here. But then it happened again. This time, it was a faint scraping sound coming from the side of the house. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, creeping toward the sound. Every step felt heavier than the last as I approached the source of the noise. When I reached the window overlooking the side yard, I hesitated before peeking out. The yard was empty. The trees swayed in the wind, their shadows dancing on the ground like restless spirits. Yet the feeling of unease lingered. I locked the window and stepped back, my breathing shallow. It had to be my imagination, or so I told myself. The next hour passed uneventfully. I tried to distract myself with a comedy show, but the humor felt hollow against the gnawing anxiety in my chest. Just as I began to relax, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my neighbor across the street. "Hey, are you okay? I thought I saw someone near your house earlier. Looked like they were in your driveway." ***. My stomach dropped. I typed back quickly. "What did they look like? Did you see where they went?" ***. The reply came after a tense pause. Couldn't make out much. Just a tall figure. Might have been wearing dark clothes. "Be careful." I stared at the message, my mind racing. The urge to dismiss it as a misunderstanding battled with the growing sense of dread. I decided to do a quick check of the house, ensuring every door and window was securely locked. As I moved through each room, the shadows seemed to stretch and shift, playing tricks on my eyes. Back in the living room, I debated whether to call the police. What would I even tell them? That my neighbor saw a shadowy figure and I felt uneasy? It seemed paranoid. Instead, I opted to stay alert, keeping my phone close and the lights on. Hours passed, and the quiet grew oppressive. Just as I began to think the night would end uneventfully, a loud crash shattered the silence. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized the sound had come from the back of the house. The kitchen window. Adrenaline surged as I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy bookend, and crept toward the noise. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each sound amplified in the stillness. When I reached the kitchen, I saw the source of the crash. The window was shattered, glass scattered across the counter and floor. The curtains billowed in the wind, but it wasn't the wind that had broken the glass. A shadow moved in the corner of my eye. I spun around just as a figure stepped into the room, their face obscured by a mask. For a moment, neither of us moved. My grip tightened on the bookend as my mind raced. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice trembling. The figure tilted their head, as if considering my words, before stepping closer. Instinct took over. I swung the bookend, catching them on the shoulder. They stumbled back, but it only seemed to anger them. They lunged at me, and we crashed to the floor, a tangle of limbs and desperation. I fought with everything I had, kicking and clawing, until I managed to break free. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed a kitchen knife, pointing it toward the intruder. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice steadier now. They hesitated, their dark eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought they might comply, but then they rushed at me again. The struggle was chaotic, a blur of motion and fear. I slashed wildly, the knife connecting with flesh. The intruder let out a pained grunt and staggered back, clutching their arm. Blood dripped onto the floor, stark against the pale tiles. Realizing they were at a disadvantage, they turned and bolted toward the broken window. I didn't chase them. My legs felt like jelly as I backed into the corner, clutching the knife like a lifeline. It wasn't until I heard the sound of sirens in the distance that I allowed myself to breathe. My neighbor must have called the police. When the officers arrived, I told them everything. They searched the area and found the intruder hiding in a nearby yard, their blood trail leading straight to them. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was over. The nightmare had ended, or so I thought. Even with the intruder caught, the sense of violation lingered. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary. Every creak, every shadow, brought back the terror of that night. It would take time to heal, but I was determined to reclaim my space. For now, though, I took comfort in one simple fact. I had survived. It started as an unremarkable Friday evening, the kind where routine dictated every action and calm seemed like the only certainty. I had spent the day entrenched in chores that tethered me to the comforting monotony of suburban life. Laundry folded into neat stacks, the fridge stocked with groceries, and the floor swept clean. These simple acts of order masked the unease I would soon confront. As the golden light of day began to wane, I curled up on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. The house exhaled silence, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of trees outside. I flicked through my phone, mindlessly scrolling, my thoughts as mundane as the memes filling my screen. Yet, beneath the surface, the shadows of the evening crept closer. It was around 8 o'clock when the first knock came, soft but deliberate, cutting through the quiet like a blade through fabric. My heart paused, then raced. Visitors were uncommon at this hour, and there was something unsettling about the rhythm of the sound. I approached the door cautiously, my bare feet hesitant against the cool hardwood floor. Peering through the peephole, I was met with nothing but the empty glow of the porch light. A chill prickled my skin. I lingered for a moment, straining to hear any movement outside. The wind, though gentle, seemed to whisper warnings. Convincing myself it was nothing more than an overactive imagination, I double-checked the lock and retreated to the kitchen, hoping the mundane act of boiling water for tea would steady my nerves. But the feeling of unease lingered, coiling around my chest like a tightening vice. The faint scraping noise that followed moments later confirmed my fears. It came from the side of the house, a sound too deliberate to be ignored. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Gripping my phone, I turned on the flashlight and crept toward the noise. The beam of light sliced through the darkness as I approached the side window. My breath fogged the glass as I hesitated, heart pounding, before peeking out. The yard lay still under the dim glow of a distant streetlight. Shadows danced as the wind stirred the trees, but nothing seemed out of place. Yet the feeling of being watched persisted. I locked the window and stepped back, my breath shallow and quick. Logic battled instinct. It could have been the wind, an animal, or even a figment of my imagination. But logic offered little comfort as I moved through the house, checking every lock and latch. An hour crawled by. The comedy show I put on barely registered in my mind. I sipped wine mechanically, my ears straining for every creak and groan of the house. Just as I began to convince myself that the night would pass without incident, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my neighbor across the street. "Hey, are you okay? I saw someone near your house earlier. Looked like they were in your driveway." My stomach twisted into knots. I typed back quickly. "What did they look like? Did you see where they went?" The reply came after a tense pause. "Couldn't see much. Tall, dark clothes. Didn't stick around long. Be careful." Panic gripped me, but I fought to remain calm. I didn't want to call the police only to discover it was a false alarm. Instead, I resolved to stay vigilant, every nerve on edge as I double-checked the locks and armed myself with a heavy bookend from the shelf. The hours dragged on, each second stretching longer than the last. The silence became oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional groan of the house settling. I had begun to believe the worst was over when the loud crash shattered the fragile quiet. The sound came from the kitchen. My blood turned to ice as I realized the window had been broken. Clutching the bookend tightly, I forced myself to move, the floorboards creaking beneath my hesitant steps. The kitchen was a mess of broken glass and billowing curtains, the cool night air invading the space. My eyes darted around, searching for the source of the intrusion. Then I saw it, a shadow moving in the corner of the room. My breath caught as a figure stepped into view, their face obscured by a mask. The tension in the room thickened as we locked eyes. For a moment, neither of us moved. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice trembling. The intruder tilted their head, considering my words, before stepping closer. The bookend felt heavy in my hand, its weight a fragile shield against the growing danger. When they lunged, instinct took over. I swung with all my strength, the bookend connecting with their shoulder. They stumbled back, but the hit only seemed to enrage them. Before I could react, they charged again, and we crashed to the floor in a violent struggle. I fought desperately, my movements fueled by fear and adrenaline. Kicking, clawing, and twisting, I managed to break free. Scrambling to my feet, I grabbed a kitchen knife and pointed it toward the intruder. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice cracking but resolute. They hesitated, their dark eyes narrowing behind the mask. Blood dripped from a wound on their arm where the knife had grazed them. For a moment, I thought they might retreat, but instead they lunged once more. The fight was chaotic, a blur of motion and noise. I slashed wildly, the blade cutting through the air and finding flesh. The intruder cried out in pain and staggered back, clutching their side. Realizing they were outmatched, they turned and fled through the broken window. I stood frozen, the knife trembling in my hand, until the distant sound of sirens broke the spell. Relief surged through me as I realized my neighbor must have called the police. When the officers arrived, I recounted everything, my voice shaking as I described the masked figure and the harrowing struggle. They searched the area and found the intruder hiding in a nearby yard, their blood trail leading straight to them. As they were taken away in handcuffs, a wave of relief washed over me. But even with the immediate threat gone, the sense of violation lingered. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison of fear. It would take time to rebuild the sense of safety that had been shattered that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the shutters, brought back echoes of the terror I had faced. But as I stood in the light of a new dawn, I took comfort in one undeniable truth: I had survived.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for supporting this channel. It truly means a lot. As a broke college student editing all my videos on an Android phone, it takes a lot of effort to bring these stories to life. A laptop would help me create better content faster, so if you enjoy my work, please subscribe and share. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you so much.